Hello, everyone. I'm Debbie Fox Davis. I'm the Executive Director of HD Reach, and I want to welcome you to our sixth webinar in our 2022 education series. We're very glad that you can be here today. I just want to remind everybody that our entire education series is being recorded and everything is available on our website at hdreach.org. So Dr. Bonnie is going to be our speaker here today to tell us about growing up at risk. Dr. Bonnie is the Special Program Director at HD Reach, and she is also familiar to many people in the community for her work with the HD Youth Organization, HDYO, and also our patients in Virginia may know her as the Director of the Carilion Clinic of the HD program. If anybody has questions for Dr. Bonnie, please put them in the chat, and she'll try to save a couple minutes at the end for her to answer your questions. Lastly, I do want to thank all of our sponsors who have made today's presentation, this webinar, available. And I'd like to thank Teva, Genentech, Neurocrine, Sage, PTC, Unicure, and Wave. So Dr. Bonnie, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Debbie, and thank you for people who are here live, as well as people who might be watching this later on. So we're going to jump right into growing up at risk. My agenda for today is going to be a couple of different things. First, we're going to go over what does it actually mean to be at risk. Then we're going to talk about what it is like living life under a microscope and considering predictive testing. How does being at risk impact life? And also finding support. So unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, in order to understand what it means to be at risk, we really need to go back to Biology 101. So this is going to be kind of a crash course, hopefully easy to understand, about a little bit about biology, about our genes. So what we do know is that our bodies are made up of millions of cells, and the cells contain something called genes or alleles, and there's about 25,000 different genes. And genes are our DNA. It's our blueprint. It's what makes us. And genes are instructions for our bodies to make proteins, lots of different proteins, which will determine how tall or short we are, what color skin we have, what color eyes we have, the type of hair we have, how sometimes we act, lots of different things. One of these proteins is actually called huntingtin, which is really confusing because it sounds like Huntington's or Huntington's disease, but it's totally different from Huntington's disease. It's actually a protein that everybody has in their body. Everyone, even if you don't come from a family with Huntington's disease. And what we do know is that we need Huntington's for our bodies to come alive. We don't know as scientists, the scientists don't know exactly what Huntingtin protein does, but as I said, we know it's really something good that will allow us to survive. When there's a change or something that we call a mutation in this gene, it makes a protein, not that Huntingtin that's good, but a toxic protein. And what we also know is that genes are segmented into different sections of our DNA, and that's called chromosomes. And I'll show you a picture, which hopefully will make it a little bit easier. Most people, and I do say most people because there are some diseases that have additional chromosomes or something's wrong with the chromosomes, but let's talk about typically, and most people in general do have 23 pairs of chromosomes. And in 1993, the scientists were able to discover the gene which causes the symptoms of Huntington's disease, and they found it on the very tip of chromosome number 4. And each person with Huntington's disease has one chromosome that is normal and one that carries the gene for Huntington's disease. So as I promised, I'm going to show you chromosomes. So we can't tell looking at these chromosomes if this person has the gene for Huntington's disease or not, but I just want you to at least be understanding and aware of what these chromosomes are. So here is a person, and we know that because the sex gene, the last gene group of chromosomes are XY, that this would be somebody we would consider a male. And on the tip of chromosome number 4, the very, very top of one of these would be where the gene for Huntington's that causes symptoms of Huntington's disease would be. So we inherit half of our genes from our mother, our biological mother, and half from our father, because we only need 23 pairs of genes. So when a baby is conceived, these chromosome pairs will split and then the gene will decide, the genes will split, and we get half from our mom and half from our dad, so that the baby will also have 23 pairs. So every child from a parent who has Huntington's disease has this chance of inheriting the HD gene. And the parent with HD can either pass on that normal gene from the side that was the normal, or the side from the chromosome that does have the HD gene. And the chance for everybody is 50%. So if a person will be positive for Huntington's disease if they inherited that mutated gene from the parent with Huntington's disease. The person will be negative for HD if they inherited the normal gene from the parent with Huntington's disease. And keep in mind that if the person does not inherit the gene, then they will never get Huntington's disease. And if they don't have Huntington's disease, they themselves can't pass it on to their children. So hopefully that explains to you exactly what it means to be at risk. But there's a lot of misconceptions about being at risk as well, and hopefully I'm going to clear some of those up. So we talked about the gene splitting, and that the person who is the child of someone who has Huntington's disease has a 50% chance of inheriting one or the other of these genes. But many people who I talk to over the years, over the 25 years that I've worked with people who have Huntington's disease, many of them who are at risk or who are coming into me for gene testing feel that they definitely have this gene for Huntington's disease. And the reason we know, because on paper, scientifically, we know it's 50%, but a lot of times people just see one side as like, I just know I feel like I have this gene. And sometimes it's just our way of coping, that if we expect the worst, that we hope for the best, that we're just going to say, if I have this, I'm going to think my whole life that I have this gene. So if I'm told that I do, then it's not going to be a big surprise. And if I'm told that I don't, then this is going to be great for me. So it's kind of a way of coping. Also, I do hear a lot of people and families say, well, one of the children or one of us has all the siblings, must have it. But remember that chance has no memory. So for example, if you toss a coin 5 times in a row, yeah, it might not show up heads 5 times in a row. But if you think about families even, sometimes you meet that family that has 5 boys or 3 girls. And even though there's a chance for that child to be male or female, if we want to just use gender as male or female, then again, chance has no memory. Chance does not remember what happened the time before. So a lot of times people will say, well, if I have it, then my sibling doesn't, or I just tested negative, so now I'm really concerned because my sibling thinks that they must be the one who has Huntington's disease. And again, I need you to remember that every single person has a 50% risk. So I've tested lots of families where I've met all the children and adult children in the families, and all 3 have been negative. I also do have lots of other families that all the children are positive, or some of the children or some of the children are positive, some of the children are negative. So again, chance has no memory. The other thing I do here is that I look or I act just like my parent with Huntington's disease. So if we go back and again, look at those chromosomes, here are those chromosomes, all these different chromosomes make proteins that make something. And if we talk about just a tiny tip of chromosome number 4, I need someone to put themselves on mute. You guys, okay, sorry. I hear somebody else talking. So if we're talking just about that tip of chromosome number 4 making that protein, there are all these other genes that will tell us how we look and how we act. So again, that's a misconception that just because you look or act like a parent doesn't mean that you will have Huntington's disease. And again, the examples I can give you are all the people that I've tested over the years. There are some people that look just like their parent with Huntington's.
I am here. Oh, that's
Somebody is still not on mute. If I can ask everyone to go on mute, that would be really helpful. It looks like everyone is. Okay, so again, just going back to those families, that sometimes people will look exactly like the parent with Huntington's disease or walk the same way or act the same way. And when we find out and we do the gene test, we find out that they are negative for Huntington's disease. And I have other people that don't look anything like their parent, and they do have the gene for Huntington's disease. So again, that's just a misconception. The other misconception I hear a lot is that there's a pattern of HD in my family. For instance, all the women have Huntington's disease, or only the youngest person of each of these generations has Huntington's disease, or it's something that looks like a pattern to somebody. And again, I really need to let people know that there is no script or no pattern. Every single person born from somebody who has this gene has a 50% chance. For those families that saying all of the young people or all the old people or the middle child or all the women or all the men, remember, this is a family disease. And if you look really over all the generations and all the aunts and uncles and cousins, my guess is that you probably would find somebody else who doesn't fit that pattern. But again, it's something really important to understand. So let's talk a little bit about something I call living under the microscope. And sometimes people call this symptom hunting. And this is when people who are in families with Huntington's disease look for symptoms, not on purpose, but just will look for symptoms of Huntington's disease in themselves. So they might not be consciously aware of saying, oh, I'm going to look for symptoms. But for example, I can take myself that I don't have Huntington's disease in my family, but if I'm walking down the street and I trip, or if I'm trying to hold on to something and it drops, I'm not thinking, oh my gosh, I have Huntington's disease. But people who are at risk tend to do this a lot at times. It really just depends on the person. They're thinking, oh my gosh, is this the start of Huntington's disease? And that's with all the symptoms of Huntington's disease. And if you know me a little bit, you know that I try to teach people about the symptoms, the 3 types of symptoms, the 3 groups of symptoms with a letter M, and that's the movements, memory, and mood. So again, let me take me as an example. So if I trip or if I lose my grip on something, I'm not thinking, oh my gosh, that was a symptom of Huntington's disease. Or for example, like all of us do, when you're just starting to fall asleep and you get that little jolt and your arm, jumps up or your body jumps up a little bit. Again, that happens to all of us. And I'm not thinking that must be a symptom of Huntington's disease starting. But sometimes people who are at risk tend to feel this way. The same thing can happen with just remembering simple or familiar things, forgetting somebody's name in your family, or forgetting a phone number or an address that you knew for so many years over and over that you just for a second or a couple minutes or for a while can't remember that phone number. Again, that could be, for some people who are at risk, that fear of, oh my gosh, is Huntington's disease starting or the symptoms starting for me? And for other people, there's also that losing that temper or anxiety or depression, which we know can be symptoms of Huntington's disease, but we have all done that, especially the young people that I work with who are going through puberty, the adolescents, the teenagers who, because of hormones and other reasons, have a lot of these things anyway, that they're more anxious or they lose their temper or they're moody, as their family will say. That doesn't mean, even if they have the gene for Huntington's disease, that doesn't mean that that's a start of symptoms of Huntington's disease. So it's really important to know that people who are at risk do experience this, and it's really important to start talking about this. But there are also other factors that might cause these incidences. So part of that could be just stress. When we are stressed, it's really hard for us to concentrate and think properly. That could be one of the reasons. Certainly lack of sleep. When we don't get enough or good sleep, then a lot of times we might experience things that feel like symptoms of Huntington's disease, but they really aren't. Also, in terms of lack of food, we've talked about people who are hangry, who are hungry and then get angry. That happens to so many people. But again, if we don't have the right food for whatever reason, we don't have enough money to buy the right food, or our choices are food that doesn't really, are not good for nutrients for our bodies, that they don't give us enough of the things that are good for our bodies, that could be a reason that we are experiencing some of these symptoms. Same with hydration. If you're not drinking enough water, or sometimes there are people who drink too much of water, those could be reasons for having some of these symptoms. I also put in this bullet caregiving. Now, caregiving really should go under stress, but especially for people who are at risk. They're that generation who are saying, I'm now at risk, but I'm also taking care of maybe a sibling or a parent or a grandparent who has Huntington's disease. And then all of a sudden they're thinking, oh my gosh, do I have all these symptoms of the person that I'm taking care of? So it falls under stress, but I think it's really important to know, especially people who are at risk, who are hands-on caregivers, there's this extra burden that they have in terms of thinking, do I have some of the same symptoms? And please do remember that there are other medical issues that can go on, whether that's physical health, if they have some other disease or illness that's going on, or their mental health. And I talk about this because it's really important to know that you can have anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues without having Huntington's disease. So it just means that there are other reasons in terms of stress, or that your chemical imbalance or your wiring is a little bit different, so that you don't have to have this gene for Huntington's disease, but you have a lot of the stressors that go along with it. So that's really important to know, that mental health and physical health can lead, without having the gene for Huntington's disease, to some of those symptoms that look like Huntington's disease. And of course, that last one that I talk to people about all the time is substance use. So this is drugs and alcohol. And even though people feel that that they want to smoke marijuana, or they are using these things because they found them on the internet, the long run will show that a lot of these drugs can really impact our brains. So certainly marijuana in terms of depression, other drugs in terms of anxiety, alcohol in terms of all those symptoms as well, really can lead to some long-term effects. So I want people to at least think about those. I know that there's a lot of adults and you're going to make choices for yourself, but do think about how these are going to impact you, and thinking that these might be symptoms of Huntington's disease. So let's talk a little bit about considering predictive testing, which is something that I talk to a lot of people who are at risk. Now, the decision to test is absolutely personal and should be made by the individual themselves. Really, what we do know is only a small percentage of people who are at risk actually do get gene tested for lots of different reasons. And for today, what I'm going to do is to talk to you about adult onset Huntington's disease. And that's for people in terms of predictive testing who are 18 years and over. Because in order to make that decision yourself and to sign a consent form, you do need to be 18. Now, we know that there is a juvenile onset form of Huntington's disease, but that's a little bit different right now. And that's something, if you do have questions about that, we'll answer those, but we're going to focus on adult onset of Huntington's disease. And when I talk to people who are at risk, there are people who talk about worrying about when to test, how to test, who to tell, and when to tell. So we're going to talk about all of those. So let's talk about when to test. I think it's really important to talk to HD healthcare experts, and this can be without even opening up a chart on you or a file on you. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means in a second. But I think it's really important, especially if you come from a family that you are at risk and you have a loved one who is seen by HD healthcare experts. You can start talking to the doctors, the social workers, the nurses, the genetic counselors in terms of some questions that you have about testing. So I think just starting to ask those questions as a family who is affected by Huntington's disease. And in the HD community, you will hear two words: impacted and affected by Huntington's disease. What we tend to think is somebody who's impacted by Huntington's disease has that gene and might or might not be symptomatic. If you are affected by Huntington's disease, you have a friend, a family member, somebody in your family who you might not be blood related to. It could be that you are an offspring of somebody who has Huntington's disease, so you are at risk. Or you could have a family member where you are not at risk because that's not the biological connection that you have. It could be a significant other, a partner, a spouse, a friend, a coworker who's close. So those are all the people who are affected by Huntington's disease. We call this a family disease, and it's even more, it's chosen family as well. So this is really important, that if you have access to different support systems and different healthcare experts, that you can start to talk to them about some of these things. And I'll give you some of those resources as well. I really do think it is really important to talk to other people at risk. Find out from them if they're willing to talk to you, if what their thoughts are about testing, or what their thoughts are in terms of when they want to test, or have they thought about that. So that can be really helpful. I also do think it's really helpful to talk to people who have tested positive as well as negative, because you can get their story. Their story is not going to be exactly your story, but I think it's really going to be helpful to say, what would you do different? Would you do anything different? What are some questions that you asked? What are some questions you wish you would have asked? What surprised you the most? So you'll be able to get some information in terms of what their experience is like, and then decide, is that going to be helpful for you on your journey if you do decide to test or not? And what I do know that many people will say to me, they just knew that they were ready. I know that I'm ready to have this done. And this is a couple of things that people say to me over the years. The first is that they've worried so much that HD was just taking over their lives, that they would wake up in the morning and they would just say, is this going to be a day that I have symptoms? It's just absolutely everything in my life is focused on Huntington's disease. And they just needed to know because they couldn't function otherwise. A lot of times people will say, I want to know so I can make future plans. And we'll talk again a little bit about this, but that could be they're trying to make decisions about their education, their career, relationships. And they're saying, if I have this information, it will help me with that fork in the road of saying, do I go this way or do I go that way? For them, it could be helpful to have that information. And also sometimes people say, even though I just said to you that it's an individual choice and they have to make that choice, I do have some people who say, well, my kids are getting older, and so I felt it was time. They're starting to date, or they're in relationships. They're starting to think about having children. So I want to know for me so that I can let them know if they are at risk at a different percentage, or if that they don't have to worry about Huntington's disease. So those are some things in terms of when people test. In terms of how to test, I do know that there are lots of different options. These are pretty much the two options that I recommend and support and are most familiar with. So if you have more questions about this later on, we can certainly talk about this. But these are sort of the two that I'm most familiar with over the 25 years that I've been helping people in terms of genetic testing and being at risk that I support. And the first one is that you can certainly go to a medical institution, especially one that is an HD testing center. So they are with healthcare providers who have knowledge about Huntington's disease. So not just a primary care doctor or somebody, but an institution that is quite knowledgeable and provides all the different counseling that is suggested when people do go for testing. And there's two ways to do that. A lot of institutions, medical institutions, and I can tell you that this is what Carilion Clinic does, is that when people want to come into our clinic and when they want to have their test done, then we will bill their insurance company, whether that's private insurance, Medicare, Medicaid. So it's really important to know, and again, we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but when people have insurance through their employers, that the employer, not that they go and they look through your charts on purpose, but an employer who is providing health insurance does have the ability to go and find out about medical things that are going on with you, that is not something that they are allowed to do that they are allowed to find out information about anything that they're paying for, basically. So that's one. And usually when we do that, the person will give us their real name and we will test them and we'll give them back information. But again, it is billed through their insurance company, which is paid for by their employer. So the employer does have privy to this information. Another way for some medical institutions, and unfortunately we don't do that right now through Carilion, is that if they say, I'd want to do this anonymously, there are some medical institutions who say, we will give you a pseudonym, which is just a fancy name for a false name, and it doesn't go through their insurance company. It's either covered somehow else or that you privately pay for this. And it goes into a firewall, a different part of a chart that they're saying, that people can't get access to. So if you privately pay for this, your insurance company will not get access to this information. And for a lot of people, that's what they want to do because they want to control who can get this information, who has privy to this information. Another way is right through HD Reach. So my caveat with this is right now we are only able to test people who live in or who are visiting 3 states. And those three states are North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. So I think it's really important to know that if you live in the state or you'll be visiting the state, and we can talk to you about that if you are interested and you are out of state, that we have an at-risk decision path and a genetic testing path, where pretty much most of the visits, everything is online with healthcare professionals, whether that be me and then talking to a psychiatrist. The only part of the testing process, if after the decision, the at-risk decision path is done, after we've discussed is that person ready, and then they see a psychiatrist online. The only part that's going to be in person is that there's a mobile phlebotomist, and that's just a fancy word for someone who draws blood, so that that person will meet the client, and it is all under a false name. We don't accept any insurance, although there are some people who do want to get a super bill to put that through their insurance company, but it is private pay, or if people are having difficulty paying, you can talk to us about some scholarships or waivers or things like that. So it's really important to know that this is very different than any of the medical institutions that are out there. It is totally separate, it is not attached to a medical institution or your medical chart at all. So that might be really comforting to some people to say, I'm going to go someplace, I'm going to be able to do this online. I get the results online. We'll talk to you about all that information. And for details about that, please do give us a call and let us know. I think we still do have some webinars about that, and we're happy to talk to you about the at-risk decision path as well as the genetic testing path. So now that I've given you all kinds of information, now I'm going to tell you time out. And before you test, I need to slow you down. It's really important for people, before they even have a chart or a file or anything on themselves through a medical institution or even through HD Reach, to look into some of your benefits. So again, we're going to do a little bit of kind of 101 housekeeping here. When I say benefits for people, I'm talking about different types of insurance or income. So that includes health and dental insurance, which for a lot of people, that's covered under their employer. Their employer offers them a group plan. So with health insurance, the employer does not ask your age. They don't ask if you have genetic illnesses. They don't ask if you have a family history of any illnesses. They can't ask if you're pregnant. They can't ask if you have cancer. They can't ask if you are HIV positive. None of these things, because it's under a group plan. So for a lot of people who work for, especially employers that have over 25 people, you might be offered insurance. So that's a good thing. What about life insurance? Sometimes there are employers who offer you maybe one time your annual salary for life insurance. And if you have enough resources, you might say, well, that might not be enough, because when I die, I want to make sure that people have enough money to live, to continue to live. So you might want to, instead of this group plan, you might want to get an individual policy. Whenever you get an individual policy, that insurance company, no matter what it is, can ask you lots of questions. They can ask you, they can come out and draw blood on you. They ask you for all of your doctors so that they can get medical records on you. They ask you a lot of questionnaires, a lot of questions on your family history, or what you do if you smoke, what you do normally, how you take care of yourself. And they're allowed to do that because it's an individual plan. They're basically calculating out the risk. Is it worth them to insure you? Then we have something called disability insurance, which is long-term and short-term disability. And people get confused between disability insurance and long-term care insurance. What disability insurance is, short-term being within 6 months and long-term being after 6 months, but longer than a year, is basically an income that if you're not able to work at the job that you have, that you are given money that is a percentage of what your normal salary would be. And you can usually get that through an employer. Again, that's a group plan. Or for people who have paid into Social Security, they can sometimes, if they're eligible, get Social Security disability. They get long-term disability, SSDI. So then that's a whole procedure that you need to go through. So those are some things to think about. The one that I think is really important if you are at risk is really thinking about long-term care insurance. And what long-term care insurance is basically a pot of money that you can decide how much care and what kind of care, where you want to get this care. So for instance, we do know that people with Huntington's disease usually will need a lot of care that's not like surgery, or they don't need to be in the hospital a lot, but they need long-term care, whether that's at home with home health people or in a long-term care facility that we call assisted living or nursing home. So that's one that a lot of employers don't necessarily provide. But if you do want to have that insurance and you have an individual plan, on the applications, a lot of times the applications will ask, do you have a history of a genetic illness? Now, they are also, as I mentioned, asking you for all of your doctors, so that they can get the medical records. If you hold back and you're not telling them the truth, that yes, you do have a genetic illness in their family, or yes, you did get tested and you know that you're positive, then that's illegal and it's actually medical fraud. So a lot of things can happen. Because a lot of times when we take out these policies, we're healthy, and then it could be 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line. We might not remember in 20 years the information that we gave the insurance company. So a lot of times what happens is that the insurance company finds out that they provided this policy after you found out about these illnesses in your family. And again, what can happen is that you lose all the money that you put in over the years, and then you also don't have the long-term care insurance. So we do not support fraud or leaving out information. So if you are interested in testing, or if you are at risk, it might be really helpful to look into these benefits. Now, for some people, they say to me, you know what, I can't afford that. And that's fine, as long as you are an educated person and you know that if you are tested positive, that it's either going to be extremely expensive, or you might be denied being able to get some of these insurance policies. That's all we want you to do, is to talk to people and figure out, is this something that will benefit you? And I also want you to know that, again, the insurance policies can ask about genetic illnesses in the family, so you do need to be honest about that. But also think about the generations. So for example, if I'm working with somebody who has a mother with Huntington's disease and an adult child, and they're saying, well, my mom has Huntington's disease, but I want to look into my benefits. And they look into their benefits and they say, you know, I can afford this. I can go and get long-term care insurance. Great. But then they go and get tested. I want them to think also, before they get tested, about the other generations. So because I have an adult child, I want them to look into all these benefits as well. Because if the question on that is, do you have a mother or father who was tested for a genetic illness? Before I get tested as the mom, then the answer would be no, I didn't. So this is something to talk to your whole family about, and lots of different generations, especially if they're over 18. And I do have people who say to me, well, if I bring an 18 or 19-year-old into an insurance broker's office for long-term care insurance, aren't they going to say, what's going on? Yeah, they might, but the ones that I've worked with over the years know that this is part of life, and that as long as you have not done anything wrong, meaning that you have not lied or avoided giving information to them, that you saw somebody or you talked to someone about Huntington's disease, any healthcare experts, then you haven't done anything wrong. So I'd really suggest talking to those aunts and uncles and cousins to say, hey, maybe now we should look into getting benefits. So that's before you test. And again, I'm just kind of giving you a little bit of this. If you have questions about this and it's confusing, please do let us know. HD Reach can help. HTSA has an incredible person who's a legal person who can help with some of these things to explain them. But we want to make sure that this is clear, that you at least take a step back and say, I'm at risk. There might be some proactive things that I should do. Okay. Another really, really important part of all of this is who to tell. I think it is really important to talk to your family and friends, your close group of people, prior to actually testing. There are so many people who I've worked with, and that stories that we have heard over the years of people who said, I wanted to do this alone, or I only had one person in the family who I wanted to tell, and nobody else knew. And, I got tested, and I was going to say I said to myself, if I'm positive or negative, I'll decide when I'm going to let people know. And then when they tested positive, they just said to themselves, I don't know how to do this. I feel guilty. I feel like it's going to be a burden. I don't know the right time to tell my family or friends or people that I've tested positive. And there are people who have walked around for years and years carrying this burden. And sometimes after a while, when they finally tell the family says, why didn't you tell me? We would have been there to support you. And that's a huge burden, extra burden that somebody who is at risk and now who is tested positive had to carry around. So if you talk to friends and family prior to testing, that takes the burden off of you and gives the control back to that support person. And a real easy way to do that is just to say, hey, I'm thinking about talking to somebody about testing for the HD gene. Would you like to be part of my journey? And if they say yes, then you can say, okay, this is as much as I need you either with me, or I'll call you, or these are the days that I'm going. And now I know that you want to be part of this journey. And there might be friends and family who just say, I can't handle it. I don't want to know. And that's fine. And now you know that that's not going to be someone who you're going to give the information to. Another caveat on that is if you are telling other people, you can say to this person, I won't tell you, but I can't promise that other people won't disclose this to you. So you've kind of taken off that burden as well. So it's really important, I think, to talk to family and friends beforehand so that you can decide with them and they can tell you if they'd like to be part of this journey with you. So when to tell? I think in terms of, again, talking to support people prior to testing does remove that worry about when to tell them after the fact. But there are other considerations. So these might be new relationships. Either you have tested positive already and you're saying, now I have this new relationship, when do I tell? Or you are somebody at risk and you're saying, I'm going through this testing process and I have a new relationship, whether it is an intimate relationship, a friendship, anything, that you're saying to yourself, what am I going to do? When am I going to tell this person? There also can be people at school, whether it's the school themselves, whether it's teachers, professors, administration at school, and also in terms of employers and coworkers. So we know that there's something called the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. It's GINA for short. And in 2008, it was signed, and it basically protects people from being discriminated against if they have a genetic illness. And that's, whether somebody, so it basically says, if this is written down that you have Huntington's disease, or you have the gene for Huntington's disease, or even if you're at risk, that somebody can say, well, I'm going to fire you because of that. That's illegal now. But there are also subtle ways. And first of all, GINA does not include everything. So it doesn't include long-term care insurance. It doesn't include people in the military. It doesn't include a lot of things. There are loopholes. But what I'm more concerned about are some of those very subtle kind of things that happen where somebody might be up for a promotion. And if your supervisor knows that you're at risk for Huntington's disease and nothing has been written down that you've done anything wrong, but let's say there's two people and they kind of perform the same, maybe the supervisor will say, well, we're going to promote that other person just because I know in the back of my head that somebody is at risk. So these are things that have happened, and it's very difficult to prove and to tell. But unfortunately, I don't have a total answer for you about when to tell. This is also very personal. So the way I will describe this is that I've certainly met people in the HD community those are the people who are wearing all the t-shirts, all the jewelry, have tattoos, have the gummy bracelets, all the things that scream Huntington's disease. And their way of interacting with people is, hi, my name is so-and-so. I'm at risk for Huntington's disease, or can I tell you about Huntington's disease? Because that's the way that they cope and they feel comfortable having this information out. For other people, they are a little bit what we call cards to their chest, that they don't feel like this is something that they want to do right off the bat. It is extremely individual, and it really is helpful to talk to somebody, HD experts, therapists, who you can talk to say, when is the right time? I met somebody, I'm at risk. When do I start talking to them about that? And it really is just a question in terms of working that out. First of all, how you were told about Huntington's disease is really important. The people around you, how they have told you in terms of your family, how you have told different people, because there's a fear people have of, is that going to stop the relationship, whether it's a friendship, a partnership, whatever it is that person going to pity me? Are they going to treat me different? So these are all things that are very individualized and really should be talked out with somebody so that you can make a decision going forward. So let's talk a little bit about how being at risk impacts life. And it does impact life on all levels. So it could be personal in terms of people deciding about their education, about their career, and about the relationships, as we just talked about. So it's really important to know that for education, some people say, well, I am at risk. And does this, I've always wanted to be a physician. And I'm thinking about, is this really something I want to put all of these years into? I know it's 4 years of undergraduate, 4 years of medical school. Then I have my internship and my residency and my fellowship. Do I want to do this knowing that I'm at risk? And what happens if I become symptomatic? If I have this gene and I become symptomatic? People are trying to say, how can I make these decisions? And again, they're very individual choices. The same with careers. Do I really want to be in this career? I sit at my desk and I get a paycheck every 2 weeks and I'm living, but does it really feel like I am living? Have I made a good career choice? Some people decide that they want to choose a totally different path. And the same is true with relationships. And I think one of the strongest impacts that I have witnessed, that I have been part of, was many, many years ago. There was a young woman who was in high school, and I would counsel her, and she didn't tell a lot of people at high school, that she was at risk. And she would get really upset because sometimes people would come in and say, oh, my cell phone is broken, or I broke my screen, or I'm having a bad hair day or something. And she was thinking to herself, they don't even know that I've got a dad with end-stage Huntington's disease in a nursing home. And my thing is he even going to see me graduate? So this to her was, really an impact at being at risk, because she was almost angry at people for saying, those are little problems. And, I have something else that's going on. And I'll tell you that, what she decided to do after we talked for a long time, for actually a couple of years, is she decided to do a senior thesis on Huntington's disease. And I actually went into the high school to do a presentation on Huntington's disease. And she decided at the end she was going to get up and she was going to let people know that she was at risk for Huntington's disease. And it was really emotional. It was really amazing. But this is how being at risk impacted her life and what she wanted to do, and in terms of letting people know. I also do have people who say, am I wasting time? Am I wasting time on an education? Am I wasting time in terms of this career? And again, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. It could be that we are going to have, even though I know even recently we've had some setbacks in terms of clinical trials, maybe there is going to be some disease modifying treatments. Maybe there's going to be something that slows down Huntington's disease. Maybe there's going to be something that cures Huntington's disease in the future. We just don't know. But it really can be helpful to talk to people if you're in this kind of like, am I wasting my time? Should I be doing something different? Also, there's a lot of people who take risks. Now, there can be what I call not great risks, and risks, that are kind of fun and on the edge type of thing. So again, let me give you examples. In terms of taking risks, I do have people who say, I'm at risk, and so I'm going to just party. I don't care. I'm not going to go to school, or I'm going to use drugs, or I'm going to be very sexually active and promiscuous because I'm just, I'm throwing my hands up. And again, especially being at risk, you're 50% at risk. We don't know if there's going to be a cure in the future or something to slow this down. So, I can't stop you from taking these risks unless you're harming yourself or others. But is that something that you want to do because you're angry at being at risk, but are there other things that you can do? And then those other things of taking risks and living a little bit on the edge. I have seen so many videos of especially young people who are at risk jumping out of planes and tandem jumping to to videos of songs of "Live Like You're Dying." So they're just saying, you know what, I'm just going to grab life and just go and just do some of these things that I might have been a little too afraid to do, but I'm also going to take care of myself and do fun things, but I'm taking risks in a good way. Also, I really want to let people know that there is a lot of encouragement as well. So for example, I've talked about bucket lists. I put down bucket list here. I do have some people who, when I talk to them about, so tell me, you're at risk and you're talking about wanting to get tested. Why is that? And they might say to me, well, I have this bucket list, and if I'm positive, I want to check off all of these things. I say, okay, well, what prevents you from checking off all these things, even if you're still at risk and you remain at risk? Now, you might not be able to do it all in a year. You might not be able to do it in I'm tested and I'm positive and I want to do all this before I become symptomatic. But what happens if you decided that you could try to check off one of these things each year and still be at risk? And the reason I push that is because once we give people the information that they're positive or negative, we can never take that information back. So it's really important to know that you feel that you are ready. If it's because of a bucket list, you might want to attack a couple of those things on your bucket list and say, do I still feel like I want to know these results? Do I still want to be tested? And either way, it's really important whether you decide when you're at risk to test or not to test, to know that you can still achieve so much. I have people who are at risk, people who have tested positive, and people who have tested negative, who go on to do amazing things. And that could be physically that they do amazing things, or socially that they go and change policies and work with people, or just creative wise, that they're being creative and they have a lot of creativity. So being at risk doesn't mean that you can't achieve all these wonderful things as well. And again, we don't have that crystal ball, so we don't know what's going to happen in the future. So I think it's really important to talk to people about your hopes and your dreams and your fears. And also just finding support. It is really important to reach out to others. And I use this term family, but to me, family doesn't mean only blood family. It means chosen family. Do we have the network of support that we can talk to people about being at risk and our fears and our concerns? And if you don't have family, and I understand that some people don't for lots of different reasons, do find healthcare professionals. I think that would be really important to talk to some healthcare professionals who understand and have worked with people. There's also support groups, and that's in-person support groups now, or even the support groups that are online. That's through Facebook, different organizations that I'll mention. And please do know that with support groups, it's not a one-size-fits-all. If you go in person or online to a support group and it doesn't fit, it doesn't feel good to you, know that there are other support groups. So don't judge being in a support group by one or two different support groups. Find the one that fits for you, the people that feel good, that it makes you feel good. Obviously, there's HD organizations, advocacy organizations like HD Reach. Debbie mentioned the other hat that I wear with HDYO, the Huntington's Disease Youth Organization. If you log on to that under HD Reach or HDYO, you can certainly find information about being at risk and about testing. And also HDSA has some wonderful resources as well. I think it's really important to stay informed. I do have some people who say, I don't want to know. I don't want to know anything about HD, or I Googled it once and something awful came up. Yeah, because that wasn't a really good site and that was really scary information. But I think if you find out some information, just basic information, it can be really helpful because knowledge can be power. We've heard that. And there's a great resource called HD Buzz. Again, HD Reach, HDYO, HDSA, but also HD Buzz can be a really great site to find out information about Huntington's disease that's in layman terms, and they explain the recent research, clinical trials, different information about Huntington's disease, and I think that that's a really good website. And also getting involved. That's in terms of some people want to be part of research, some people want to fundraise, some people just want to volunteer. And the one caveat that I'm going to put out in terms of this is please do not equate being part of research, fundraising, and volunteer with that bargaining chip of saying, if I do these things, maybe I won't be positive for Huntington's disease, if I'm at risk, if I'm going to be negative. It doesn't work that way. If you in your heart want to be part of research, fundraising, volunteering, then go for it. But it doesn't equate all the work that you do with being negative. So I think that that's really important to remind people that it's important to find support. There is support out there, and it can make you feel a lot better. So I also, and Debbie did say that you wanted to thank all of our sponsors. These are all of the different sponsors for this series. And thank you so much for your support, as well as obviously, if you want more information about upcoming webinars and live events, HD Reach is right here for you. And all you have to remember is HD Reach. If you Google that, then we will be able to help you. But you can certainly take a screenshot of this or take a photo of this. And I'm really happy that you are all here. And I think that we do have, and I will wait, if you do have questions, I'm happy to take those. So I don't know if we have anything in the chat. And I'm going to ask somebody from HD Reach to help me out with that. Or if anybody who's online now live wants to ask a question, please do go ahead and I can try to help out.
Hey, Bonnie. So I do have a question that we received earlier here at HD Reach, and I wanted to see, ask, how would you recommend bringing this up to someone's partner that I guess does not know anything about HD? This is very new. How would you recommend starting that conversation?
Yeah, and I think that that's a really good question. I touched on it a little bit, but it's very individual. So I think it's a question of, for you, for this person, thinking about how you found out about Huntington's disease. Did you find out, were you in a family that it was very open? Was this very closed? What are your thoughts and feelings about being told about Huntington's disease? And first kind of thinking about that. Then being able to sit down with somebody and say, whether it's a new relationship or a partner of, I have this information that I think it's really important for me to share with you. And I think it's also really important once you give this information to talk about your fears. So I'm going to give you this information, and here's the things that I don't want to happen. I don't want you to pity me. I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I don't want you to, do everything for me, because I'm quite capable now of doing that, especially as somebody who is at risk. So I think it's really important to talk about fears and concerns, and to be able to say, I know, if I'm at risk and I'm with my partner, I know that it's ultimately my decision if I want to be tested, but I want to know, as I mentioned, if you want to be part of my testing journey and what questions or concerns that you have. Because I have had people who have said, I'm with a partner who doesn't want me to get tested or is sort of forcing me to get tested. And those are definitely two situations that we want to talk about. What's going on, because it really needs to be this individual. But, I appreciate this question because I know it can be so scary. We have these fears of being abandoned. That person might say, I can't handle this, or somebody treating us different. So I think it's really important to, because that person is holding on to this information going, when should I tell? How should I tell? They're having this inner battle that's going on. That is a burden for them. So if they're reaching out and asking this question, it sounds like they're ready to say, I just need to sit down and get some information about Huntington's disease. That's good information that I can talk to my partner and say, I have something really important I want to share. And I think it's really important as well that sometimes people will say, I feel like damaged goods, whether they are at risk or they have this gene. And sometimes what I say to them is, okay, I can't take that away from you, but if I flip this on you and your partner is the one who has this gene or is at risk, do you feel like they're damaged goods? And many times people, oh no, of course not. Of course I don't. Okay, so can you give your partner the benefit to be able to say, maybe that's not how they see me. Maybe that's how I feel myself, that I'm these damaged goods. So I think it's really important to be able to have these conversations, say, this is my fear, that I'm damaged goods, or you're not going to want me, you're not going to want to be around me, or you're going to treat me different. So let's talk about all of these things. Hopefully that will help.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. I do have another question. My older brother is getting tested next month. What is the best way for me to show support to him?
Okay. Wow. This is a great one as well. Lots of good questions. So it sounds like there has been a discussion because you know that your older brother is getting tested. And again, that's amazing because all of that really work on, there's no more secrecy there. So to be able to, whether this is a biological brother or that you already know that you're at risk or that you've tested positive or negative, I think plays into this. So that should be acknowledged to say, I'm at risk too. And I'm thinking, I don't know if I'm thinking about going through this or not, but I want to let you know that I want to support you. What's the best way you think I can do that? Do you want me there? Do you want me to just kind of wait in the wings? Do you want me to talk to you? Do you want me to move away? Really having this discussion out in the open of, we know that you're going through this testing. My preference, I'm just going to kind of jump to what I'm hoping that the person would say is, my preference is that I want to be part of your journey, but I really want to know how to help you. And I'm going to take the burden off of you to say, I want to know what your results are. So if this person is at risk, that this this brother says, okay, I'm negative, and maybe we're both thinking that I'm going to be positive, or I'm positive, and what's that going to mean for me? Asking this question. By saying to the brother, we're going to do this together. I might have all kinds of feelings once we know these results, but I'll talk to you about that, and I'll talk to other people about that. So I think that's really important to know that that this person is being open and honest, with the brother, and that the brother has at least let them know that they're going to be tested, and kind of, being one step ahead of being able to say, how do you want me to support you? Can I be part of your journey? Are you going to allow that? What part can I play? And just know that I can get my own counseling as well. That if you are, whatever your results are, I will talk to somebody about that so I can process my feelings as well. Hopefully that will be helpful. Other questions from anyone? Please do know, even if you didn't have a chance to ask a question, if you're a little shy, or again, if you're watching this on demand and you had some questions, you can always reach out to us at HD Reach and ask, and we will get back in touch with you. I promise you that. There are lots of good advocacy organizations that will help as well, and have information about being at risk and testing and all of these different things that I went over, especially the benefits. So please do just reach out, and we will guide you in the right. If we can't answer it directly, we will guide you in the right direction.
Thank you, Bonnie, so much for your presentation. As always, I've learned a lot from you, and I really appreciate your time, your expertise. I know that there probably are a lot more questions out there, and sometimes it's hard to put them in the chat, but as you said, you can always call HD Reach or go on our website and find out any information that you're looking for, or ask any questions that you have. And I do just want to let people know that we will be editing this webinar and having it up on our website. It'll be up in about a week. So it's something you can watch again, or you can share the link with other people that you think may be interested. And we have a number of other really great webinars coming up in our series. And in just a couple of weeks, we're going to have the TikTok embryologist star, Elise Daniels, speaking about IVF. In particular, IVF in the post-Roe world. So if you're interested in that, please join us. All of the webinars, you can find a list of them on our website. And I hope everybody has a great rest of their weekend, and please take care. Thank you.